Day 1132 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 915,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,230 in the past day. Then as for hardware, 4 tanks, 3 APVs, 30 artillery, and 1 air defense system, amounting to a very low armored vehicle day of losses, which correlates with the rate of removal of Russian tanks from storage bases, and a rate that has now fallen by 3.5 to 4 times compared to 2022. Tank restoration rates have plummeted from 120 to 150 units per month in 2022 to about 25 to 30 per month by early 2025. Which marks a substantial deficit, indicating an inability to compensate for losses on the battlefield. This, coupled with a growing dependence on civilian vehicles and infantry due to shortages in mechanized units, will likely compel Moscow to either scale back offensive operations or endure far greater infantry casualties, thereby straining its economy and military capacity by later this year. It truly is a war of attrition. Russia is depleting its Soviet-era war chest at an alarming rate, something that has already been distinctly evidenced on the battlefield, with their application of civilian vehicles to storm positions, just like that almost fluorescent green open-top civilian vehicle we saw yesterday. That was clearly challenged in overcoming obstacles of barbed wire, being simply not fit for purpose in battlefield assault operations. Headed across to the map now with a day of mysterious fires around different areas of the Russian motherland. First was an unspecified warehouse in Astrakhan. Next was a significant fire that erupted at a restaurant and nightclub in Vologda, engulfing an area of 1,000 square meters and extending to the roof of a nearby ship repair facility. And then there was the case of a fire that broke out on the taxiway of the Kerch airport in occupied Crimea. Russian authorities and emergency services have remained suspiciously silent on that particular incident. But then there's less mystery to the next one, as Russian Z-bloggers report that a Russian ammunition warehouse in the Belgorod region exploded after a strike, which is something that is perfectly aligned with frontline expectations. Then headed across to the Ukrainian map, where the Ukrainian government and military analysts alike suggest that Russian forces are preparing to launch a fresh military offensive in the coming weeks to maximize the pressure on Ukraine and strengthen the Kremlin's negotiating position in ceasefire talks. And yet, despite 2 ceasefires attempted and Ukraine's withdrawal from Kursk, mostly, Russia could never legitimize its seized lands as a bargaining chip. And that's because the international community will never set the dangerous precedent of rewarding aggression and military occupation, because to do so would start to unwind the international rules-based order. But now more specifically on the map to Kharkiv, where the satellite heat map shows fire activity at 2 points just north of Kupiansk, and is precisely where the 2 armies meet, suggesting anything but a stagnant front, even without lines changed, as Russia looks to advance west, take Kharkiv, and annex it into the Russian Federation, which is a plainly factual statement to make. Just a small number of days earlier, the Russian army marginally increased its pre-existing positions over the Oskil River at Topoli, as a means to accomplish the same goal. However, at this location, there's very little around to capture for tens of miles. No railroads in sight or towns of interest. Although, by performing this northeastern campaign, the Russian MOD would seek to stretch Ukrainians' resources thin, whilst also seeking to create a buffer zone from here to Vovchansk, if we can make it there. There we go. All used as a means to collapse the rest of Kharkiv with later, However, the Russian forces face a great deal of obstacles here, not the least of which is the limited road infrastructure in the region, and of course, a determined defender. Then headed further down the map as Ukrainian fighters of the 30th Mechanized Brigade repelled a small Russian offensive as a mechanized assault in the Soledar area of this Donetsk region, halting the enemy's advance. During the event, Russian soldiers bailed after this monstrosity was attacked. It almost appears to look like a trailer with rubber sheeting draped over it to protect from incoming quadcopters. Then headed further down the map and just below Donetsk, as some units of the Russian forces advanced about 600 meters up the road northwest of a small settlement they were previously, have to really zoom in here, so there we go, where they were previously using as a staging ground. Then headed further down the map as more reports surfaced on Ukrainian troops advancing further south into Russia's Pokrovsk salient and further jabbing into the western side of Solenya. At the same time, Russian troops have continued their attacks on Uspinivka. Then to just below this part of the map, as there were 11 recorded Russian invader attacks on the Constantinople front within the past day, with at least one of those attacks seen at the settlement of Roslin, though it may have been more of a survey team extending beyond the front contact point, acting as reconnaissance in force teams, with some of these elements taking up new positions in the south end at the agricultural buildings, and evidently to a few homes around the town as well, including the post office central to the location. As a result, Ukraine is likely to reinforce its defensive lines around Roslin and adjacent areas as a means to halt further Russian progress. This could involve deploying additional troops, artillery, or drones to contest Russian gains and prevent a sustained breakthrough as we wait to see the unfolding nature of this front. Now into Zaporizhia, as an explosion and fire was recorded in Berdiansk, with locals suggesting it's where an S-300 air defense system is based. This is the view from the city, with the fire on the spit of the land that curves around the port city. Interestingly, for this event, there was no air warning, so it was possibly some sort of self-inflicted accident. Then to the map somewhere in the east, where a new chapter in drone warfare unfolds as Ukraine's latest interceptor UAV successfully neutralizes a Russian Jabera kamikaze drone. The Ukrainian experimental interceptor, equipped with auto-targeting lock-on technologies, demonstrates an update or advancement in Ukraine's air defenses. Little more is known at this stage, but this operation, conducted by the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine, highlights the effective countermeasures being developed to address the evolving threats in the aerial battlefield. Then on the map, and in a similar fashion, we also saw the latest episode in the new series of the double-barrel shot drone. As always, very impressive, taking out any Russian FPVs in sight. Then to a related topic, as the AFU is now purposely dropping drones behind Russian lines that are cyber booby-trapped, quote-unquote. Russian soldiers who pick up the drones report how they are often infected with computer viruses, allowing Ukrainian teams to hijack the FPVs at a later time and reveal the new operator's location. There's now other related reports that AFU quadcopters are found by Russian troops to have their USB ports and onboard systems burnt out, preventing reflashing for Russian use. Russians never know what they're about to pick up on the field, severely limiting their trust in repurposing anything that they can find on the ground. Then headed across to some news, and to some break-in global news, because a Paris court delivered a significant blow to Marine Le Pen, the leader of France's far-right National Rally Party, sentencing her to 4 years in prison, 2 years firm and 2 under electronic tag, after an embezzlement verdict for her role in the fraudulent scheme involving fictitious jobs for assistants in the European Parliament. The court also imposed a €100,000 fine and a 5-year ban from public office, effectively jeopardizing her candidacy for the 2027 French presidential election. This ruling, which stems from a 2014 investigation by the European Anti-Fraud Office into the embezzlement of EU funds, has sparked international reactions, revealing strange bedfellows, with the Kremlin condemning the decision and the Hungarian leader Viktor Orban offering support to Le Pen. Of course, Le Pen's long-standing alignment with the Kremlin and her anti-EU positions have always been well documented. Looking ahead, Le Pen sidelined by a 5-year ban from public office, the National Rally Party faces an uncertain future. President Emmanuel Macron's centrist coalition remains a significant force in navigating France's path forward for the next 2 years until Macron finishes his second and final presidential term, but for now, steering the nation through a complex European political landscape. Then to some more news, as Finnish President Alexander Stubb held a press conference in London and shared details about his meeting with President Trump from yesterday. He said the meeting was useful and that 2 themes were on the agenda. The first was bilateral relations between Finland and the United States, and the second was Russia and Ukraine. According to Stubb, President Trump asked him whether Putin could be trusted, to which Stubb flatly replied that he could not. Stubb also recommended that a stronger sanctions mechanism is needed as an incentive for the ceasefire if in the event that Russia does not agree to any of the ceasefires or violates them. He also stated that Trump is quite impatient with Russia's actions regarding the scheming and delaying of the ceasefire proposals, and said that he explained to Trump that this is completely normal Russian behavior, adding, quote, "First we negotiate something, and then the conditions are changed once again." Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Meanwhile, President Zelensky expressed frustration over Russia's continued aggression despite diplomatic efforts, stating, quote, "For several weeks there has been a US proposal for an unconditional ceasefire, and almost every day, in response to this proposal, there are Russian drones, missiles, and artillery shelling." He emphasized that the scale and brutality of Russia's strikes show daily how little Putin cares about diplomacy, and insisted that stronger sanctions are needed to compel Russia to engage meaningfully in peace negotiations. Then headed across to a Russian military mobilization blunder of a sort, as Putin's Gestapo raided a fitness club in Moscow to collect cannon fodder for the invasion in Ukraine. As seen here, Kremlin police forced gym goers to lie face down, checking IDs and separating people, with some men detained and issued summons for military service. This fits a pattern seen in other recent raids, not just in gyms but also nightclubs and warehouses, where authorities target places with large gatherings, especially of men, to enforce conscription to identify those who haven't registered with military officers. Historically, Moscow and other major cities like St. Petersburg were largely spared from aggressive conscription efforts to avoid domestic unrest in politically sensitive urban centers. However, the fact that Putin's regime is now increasingly raiding large gatherings in Moscow, it marks a significant shift, suggesting the Kremlin is running out of options and is willing to risk the backlash in targeting the capital's population. It's a desperate act. So that has to be it for today, guys. I'm currently dealing with a massive sleep deficit that I can truly feel right now. So thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.